Well, as we begin the new year, take a look inside the layout room. Open the door, and here's what you see when you step in. Greeted with the industrial district on this end of the layout, and my little wow corner over here with my big bridge, and a little look around, little coal mine there, a little aisle down the middle. Again, all the work so far is pretty much on the lower deck, so this video will be covering the lower deck. The upper deck is still yet to come. And I'll try to give a little more of a detailed tour of the lower deck here, starting with this big old bridge area. This was the first area of the layout to receive any scenery of any kind, and my first attempt at fall colors. Lots of plaster and rock in here. I've got one little area to patch, and this little dirt patch down there will be eventually be a little lake bed. Try to put some water down there. This old bridge started way back in a previous layout. This layout, of course, was never finished, but there's the bridge. That's as far as it got on the old layout. And the bridge is about 2.5 feet long. It's a 30-inch radius and about 10 inches tall. And once it came to its new home, I did a little refurbishing on it and got it put into the layout on the bridge deck. Lots of foam contours there to kind of fill in the valley underneath it, the big gully underneath. So the bridge came in and out of the layout quite a few times in the process of trying to make this fit into the layout, and I had to redo the bridge deck once just to get a little more access space behind the bridge deck, so I could get back there in case I needed to get back to do some work back there, and it's proved to be useful to have that access space back there. I made some footings for the bridge using balsa foam, carved some little footings that worked well. Yeah, look, bridge is out. Uh-oh. Bridge came out again when it came time to glue all those contours in place and start filling in scenery. Lots of plaster work. The bridge was again fitted several times in and out to make sure all the scenery was going to work. And lots of plaster, lots of rock molds and carving. I probably should have made more of a stratified look, I think, in there, but turned out okay. I wanted more of a buff color too, but I ended up using more of a burnt sienna to get kind of a rustier, browner color in the rocks. Eventually filled it all in with trees. Scenery filled in nicely after a while. Lots of trees. Some were store-bought, some were homemade. And eventually started to look pretty good in that corner. So I spent a lot of time building up this area in the layout. And the bridge took a few knocks over the years, and I had to do a little repair on it from time to time, but it's looking pretty well. The only thing I'd like to add to this, maybe some guardrails down the middle of the tracks there. So I'm not quite figured out yet quite how to do that, but when I do, that'll be my next addition to that. Plus maybe some little railings on the side of it somehow, try to add a little more detail to it. It's kind of sparse in terms of details, but it works okay. And in this corner, we got the coal mine. Some of my how should I put it, geography or landscaping might not be very accurate here, because coal mines don't usually exist in rocky cliffs like that. So I'm thinking maybe eventually I should maybe fill that in with some trees, make it more of a wooded cliffside, hillside there, that more typical of coal country. So my geography may not quite be accurate in that corner. So here's the kit. Popular kit that a lot of people make. I think it was the Three Rivers coal mine, and you can see here all the work that was done to build the base for all the plaster that went into it, filling in all the areas around there, the backdrop. I eventually used some Woodland Scenics Smooth It plaster for the service road that went in there. And I had lots of these store-bought pine trees that were planted around the layout. So here's a quick little video about planting those trees. Here's a quick look at all the supplies for all the trees. And as we work our way down the line here, this little narrow portion of the layout, all that rock work, that's all carved plaster, hand carved plaster. And then we come to my control panel that I worked on. It still needs a little work. I'm missing a few labels here and there, so open that up and see the mess inside. Actually, it's a little easier than the old control panel for maintenance, because I can follow the wires a little better and try to find anything that needs fixing. And from here, move into the little engine service facility up in this little corner. And here you see the engine service facility as it started out. I made a few changes in this area. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to put there, and then I finally came up with the idea of putting this little engine house in there. Started filling in the groundwork, the base and all that. Another messy road to go in here, more sanding to get that little road in. And this area worked out pretty well. I tried to add a few little contours to it so it wasn't quite so flat here, so try to make it a little more interesting there. This was one of the first buildings I tried to put some light in. It kind of glows through the walls here, so I'll have to do a little fixing on that so the whole building doesn't glow. A little tiny shed behind the train engine house, a little tiny kit, kind of fun to build, wasn't much to it, so a little tiny tool shed behind the engine house there. Here you see it. Little farmhouse area up here. This area kind of went through a few ideas before I settled on the farmhouse, and I started out with just kind of a big plaster shell just covered over everything, and later I cut the tunnel opening and smoothed it out, put the farmhouse up there. I think I maybe should have made it a little flatter because it's a bit hilly. It's not quite a typical thing for cow pastures, but I like how it turned out. I can use a few more trees up here, I think. And eventually I'd like to get some lights up there. It's kind of a hard area to reach to get some lights, but it'd be nice to put a lamp or two up there, a little yard light and some lights inside the farmhouse. And still some work to do around the engine service facility in here. I've got a little bit of track I still need to put in place here. Goodness sakes, it's been sitting waiting for me to do for a couple of months now. So fill in that little piece of track from replacing the turnout there, and then do a little painting and ballast to fix that up. And not long ago I finished most of the major construction for this area here. Got the silos done, and that turned out very well. And as you can see, I went through a few design ideas, trying to come up with some different ideas for the silos. Finally settled on the two big white silos in the back of the flour mill, and then 4 more silos to the side. And tinkered with ideas for making these ladder cages that go up the side. We ended up making 6 of those, so those added some nice detail to the project. And I came up with a shed too to put in there to kind of give more detail. I have no idea what all that stuff is. It just looks cool, so that's what I did, just to add some more details to this whole area. And to add some little details, I came up with the idea for making a reefer wrecked car, reefer wreck out of just aluminum foil, and painted it up, and that's one of my little details in the area. I've also got some other things I'm going to add to it. I want to try to make the area behind the flour mill kind of a little junkyard area. It's funny, the things that are an eyesore in real life turn out to be points of interest for a model railroad, so eventually I'll fill in that area. Here you get another look at all the pipes and the details on the top of the silos and that I worked on. There's the shed back there. I don't know what the shed's doing. I have no idea, so just interesting stuff to add some detail to the scene. Eventually I finished it off with finally got to the hobby store and bought a few little brake wheels and attached those to the pipes up at the top of the silo, so now my workers have something to do when they climb up those ladders I spent so much time making. So this added a lot of nice detail to this area and kind of filled it in very nicely. I like how it turned out. And more to come on that, add a few more things to bring a more life to it, some figures and perhaps some other smaller details kind of cluttered around the scene. As you can see, this pretty familiar kit here, the Red Wing Milling Company, I think it's called. That's 2 kits put together, and got my lanyard in the way. Hey, down in front. Lanyard from my camera got in the way, for crying out loud. Get that out of there. Well, as I was saying, the Red Wing Milling Company here is actually 2 kits that I put together, kitbashed together, and turned out pretty well. I had a little botch in it that I had to fix, but I managed to cover it up pretty well, and it's in the back so you don't really see it. But I started out with a paper mock-up of that, and originally I had this as a backdrop building in my old layout, and broke it apart, bought another kit, and put the 2 of them together to make a larger kit. And here's a little review on how I did that. The problem with this project came from that inside corner right there that actually threw off the column spacing a little bit. So I had to shorten one wall and lengthen another just to make it square and come together. So that was one little oversight that I hadn't quite planned for, but managed to make it all work. And it, like I say, all the botches are in the back of the building where they're not as noticeable. And this little blue house-looking structure is eventually going to be the yard office for South Yard, and a little project that I started and still haven't finished. Got to come back and finish off the roof and a few other little details, but it's a neat little kit that I got to serve as the yard office here. So I hope to finish that one eventually. Need to get to work on that. And the little house next door to it is another old kit that I've got that it needs a little fixing up. And I'm thinking this might be a house for train crews that might spend the night as they come into South Yard, spend the night, and head out the next day. And this little station in the freight depot still needs to have its windows installed. Those are just openings in the walls right now, so I haven't put the little glazing in there yet. And all the road work in this area also took a long time to work. I used joint compound for the roads, which turned out to be pretty pesky. I thought it might be easy to work with, but it turned out to be a bit of a bother because it would dry and it would shrink and crack, and then I'd have to fill it in again and sand it again. So it took a lot of work to get it to look like it does now, but it eventually turned out okay. These are little excerpts from previous videos I did, so if you'd like to see more of the construction here, I suggest you wander through the video library and see the whole thing here, what I was doing to build up this area. And these are little pieces of cast plaster, real thin cast plaster, that I called plaster planks. They were shaped to fit around the base of the station here. Makes an easy way for making sidewalks. Turns out nice, and they're easy to work with. You may have noticed there are some rather large holes right there through the track. Those are openings for infrared sensors that I haven't quite got working yet for those grade crossing signals. So still fiddling with that to get that to work properly. You can see one of the holes there for where eventually I hope to have some infrared sensors for the grade crossings. So for now, this is kind of an eyesore. And the light-colored building back there is one of the few that still needs to be finished. It's just right now it's just a hollow building, no paint, no windows. It's just a book marker right now, a place marker, until I can get that one done and get some lights in it and finish that little corner there. The traffic lights was a fun little project I made to add some interest and detail to that area. And I'm trying to include a few shots here to kind of slowly move around the layout here, and perhaps might be able to catch some of the details here. Some of the figures there. Little dog next to pair of ladies there. I don't know if you can see them here. There's another dog who is kind of a stray wandering around. Looks like kind of an odd looking little dog there. I think he needs to phone home. Adding more and more details in here, like more figures and some more clutter around the yard, I think is another project I want to do. Add some more things about the yard to make it look like there's some activity there. And a little freight house here. This one was another kit that I put together, put some lights in it, and it turned out pretty well. The only thing I wish I had done differently here was to perhaps add a bit of pavement behind the freight house rather than filling it in, because as it turns out, there's really no space for vehicles to drive in and park at the docks. So I think maybe I might rethink this a little later and fill in, or rather take out the all the land work back there and fill in right where that brown patch is, make that more of a paved area for vehicles that could come in and have some room to maneuver in front of the loading docks. For now, though, there's not much space. So one little corner to figure out what to do with here, this post here, and got to figure out what to do with that. You see a few little details around this freight house here, some crates and boxes and pallets and figures moving about. Should probably put a few more vehicles in the back there, give it a sense of more activity in there. And eventually, I don't know, maybe I'll put a building around that and call it the post office. And here's kind of an overall look of South Yard. Eventually we'll get there. And I call it South Yard because it's kind of on the south side of that end of the layout. Actually, you're looking north if you were standing in the train room. And South Yard started out, as most of the layout did, on a big piece of paper trying to draw all the track lines and figure out my design, and took a little while to get this straightened out. This is where the first bit of track was laid, and pinned down the cork and started laying yard for it. Originally I only had 7 tracks planned for the yard here, but eventually I found well, I got a little extra space, so I came up with 5 more, and it gives me a total of 13 tracks in the yard, even though the additional tracks are a little short, but they still turn out to be useful and add some more tracks to the yard, more capacity, more interest, more operating possibilities. And there you see the additional tracks. The light colored ballast I thought was a little too light. I just kind of used what I had on hand at the time, so I've been gradually adding more and more darker stains and dirt to it to kind of darken it up a little bit. So I think I could probably darken it even more. It looks a little light, but it was what I had on hand, so that's what I used. And moving into the industrial district. This area took a long time to settle on because I tried to figure out what kind of buildings I wanted in there. It's a fun area in the layout. It's got lots of details. The little fence here, I'm going to have to maybe dress it up a little bit. It's a little too shiny, so I think I need to paint that a little to make it more rusty look. Here's a real early look at the concepts of the industrial district. Just a few buildings there. Another big kit that was 2 kits put together. Can't remember the name of that one, but it's another familiar Walters kit. And a little bit of a tricky paint job to get that done. I had to do a little masking and taping to try to get the paint pattern that I wanted. 2 kits put together, basically kind of doubled its size. and add some rooftop details to it, and eventually I found a good spot for it on the layout. More kits here, and finally in the corner we've got a little scratch building using the DPM modular walls. So my first attempt at dinking around with making a little building, a little Wagner storage here. Who doesn't have Wagner storage on their layout? And look around the front here, and their driveway just kind of goes straight into the wall. And another popular kit on the layout, the Woods Furniture Company. And this area's got a few little details there, a little boxcar hiding between the buildings, and a little bit of activity on the dock, little forklift, and some more fun little details in this area. Got a crooked ladder up against the building, and I'll straighten it out there so nobody falls off there. I don't know what the ladder's doing there, but somebody put it up there. Little tiny step ladders, those were actually kits that I made, probably the smallest thing I've put together for the layout. And again, this area could use a few more details. Some boxes and pallets on the loading docks there. There's a look at the Woods Furniture kit while I was building it. And the little area in the front here is kind of fun. Turn on the lights in there, you might be able to see some of the interior details. Little pizza shop on the corner, and a little tax office on the other corner. And again, just trying to move slowly about the layout here so you can see some of the details. Got some Miller Engineering signs on top of these buildings. Some little billboards on the top. Those were fun, little kits to put together. And on the back of this building there's a few little decals. You'll see those a bit later here. Looking down one of the streets from actually from the wall looking out toward the center of the train room. A few little people sitting on benches in the park area there, a little triangular park. Probably not a very scenic place to sit, but they seem to be comfortable. And another little spot over here in the end. People can watch trains come by as they sit on the benches there. This United Manufacturing building in the back was kind of designed as sort of a big backdrop building. This was scratch built from using little plaster modular pieces made of plaster that were molded from little styrene molds that I made. Took a while to put this together because a lot of the pieces kept breaking and I had to glue them back together again. And I'd file out the openings in the windows and glue them together. And eventually I had a kind of a large wall to work with. And I used my drafting table and an X-Acto knife to carve all the mortar joints in all the plaster, and it came out to be a pretty nice effect. Had to do a lot of weathering and painting and filled in windows, and I gave it some lights, and it made a very nice backdrop building. And again, if you want to see more details on how this was put together, there is a video further back in my video library that you can go back and see more of the details on how this project was put together. So it turned out to be really nice. I had some nice backdrop here, lights and so forth, so finished off that scene pretty well. Yeah, oops, not everyone is happy with all the vehicles on the layout apparently. And the industrial district was a lot of work because it had a big paved area that took a lot of time to fill and sand. and eventually got it looking a lot better than with all the mess on there. So I'm always glad to finish up a big project like that and get it cleaned up and looking nice. Eventually started coming together very well. Painted all the stripes on the roads and more details on the buildings. Finally settled on a layout or a design for all that area. Little billboard on the back of these buildings. There's the back of that unfinished building. Need to do a little work in there. Eventually came to finish off this bridge abutment for Industrial Boulevard. One of the final parts to finish on this end of the layout. And again, I used some balsa foam to carve the retaining walls there, and filled in the landscaping in there, and finally finished off that little area. There's Truman wondering what happened to the rest of the world. So Industrial Boulevard was finally done. There's another look at the traffic lights that are controlling the intersection there. Another fun project to put that together. That's being controlled with a little Arduino board underneath the layout and some small LEDs. This big building in the back, the Consolidated Shipping Building, is a kit. Several plaster castings that are glued together, and made a rooftop for it. So it makes a nice big backdrop building. I want to put a loading dock in the front of it to help hide the kind of uneven base to it. This next building that you're going to see in the corner, I don't have any construction pictures of it, but you can see it was kind of a kitbash where I sort of unfolded the building and made it look a little bigger, so it makes it kind of an interesting backdrop building. And a little bridge project at the end here of Industrial Boulevard. Took a little time to make that with cutting out the foam and adding the little bridge in here. Had some figures underneath the bridge before I put the bridge in place. More balsa foam retaining walls that were carved. And once the lights were added in there, it finished off the scene very nicely. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tour of the layout, and we'll end with some overall views of the layout, and at the very end we'll give you some recently photographed night scenes of the layout. So thanks for coming, thanks for staying, thanks for watching, and Happy New Year to everyone.